zijn hier bij Stanley Meyer, nu buiten zijn garage. En we hebben net zijn water-powered auto naar buiten gereden, waar er nu wat over gediscussieerd wordt. En er zijn dingen aan gewijzigd en zo, dus hij kan op het moment niet lopen, maar we mogen hem dus wel helemaal bekijken.
Just explaining how this thing
go ahead.
does.
Yeah, can you zoom in back in here? Are we on?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, now this is the hydrogen computer system, which was designed in order to be able to process the fuel, to produce the hydrogen gas from water and do it economically and be able to control its firing, go in the engine to allow the Volkswagen engine to run off of hydrogen. There's a lot engineering design that went into this, even though that this is our systems engineering approach. The hydrogen computer system you see here will be miniaturized down to several IC chips, which will allow us to give the economics to apply to a conventional car. Over here, there's very unique design features that had to be developed in order to develop the water fuel cell as a retrofit energy systems to conventional cars. We had to go ahead and develop the laser, what we call the laser distributor, as you see right here, which is put between the conventional rotor cap and that of the rotor assembly. And primarily what this does, this sets up the electronic signals that goes back and triggers the computer system in order to allow the car to run successfully on hydrogen. In order to run this engine off of water, we've also had to learn the ability to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal the fossil fuels. We did this by simply now pulling off a portion of the exhaust gas that's coming from the engine, as you see through this tube here, that's going through this electronic regulator that's hooked up to the hydrogen computer. And basically what's happening is that as the ambient air is going into the engine and going through the burning process, it produces the non-combustible gases that retards the speed by which the oxygen atom unites to hydrogen and bring on gas ignition. So by simply using the non-combustible gases coming from the exhaust of the engine, we now modulate and control the speed by which that oxygen unites with the hydrogen, and therefore we are adjusting the burn rate of hydrogen to co-equal that of gasoline or fossil fuels or even diesel fuel. And that gave us the #1 retrofit capabilities of retrofitting the water fuel cell technology to an existing engine. And we do this electronically. The unit that you see right here, we call this a gas processor. And basically what we're doing is we're ionizing the ambient air gases that is now going into the process. And this allows us to trigger and use the hydrogen fracturing technology and tapping into a higher energy yield coming from the hydrogen. The unit you see right here, this is referred to as a resonant cavity. Water is now fed into the resonant cavity through this water tank, and as such, we now expose the water to a very high intense pulse voltage field and restrict the amps, and therefore the electrical polarization process now allows us to release the hydrogen economically from water. And by attenuating the voltage field, the amplitude of the voltage field, we now can control the rate of the production of the hydrogen gas on demand. So this is what's referred to as a constant demand generator. We also now extend or allow the voltage amplitude to increase even to a higher level and allow the water atoms to go into an ionization state, which gives us the ability even to produce a higher energy yield by producing more hydrogen gas on demand. So the fuel now coming from the water through the electrical polarization process going into resonance meaning that we're actually tuning into the dielectric properties of water, and it allows us to reduce amps down, flow down to a minimum, and allow voltage to take over that disassociates the water molecule on demand. And those fuel gases are now coming through this electronic injector system as you see here. So basically we're now feeding the ionized air from the gas processor. We're now also taking the water fuel gases that are now coming from ordinary water. We are now mixing it with the non-combustible gases and the ambient air gases and regulating those control of the fluid mediums or for fluid mediums. And as a result, now we can tune in and allow this engine to run off of natural water. This system's approach, this particular unit here is referred to as the VIC, or the voltage intensified circuit technology. This is being miniaturized down to a very small, lightweight system. This is demonstrated in our systems engineering approach on the technology that we can apply it to other applications, not only in the transportation area but also in industrial applications. So it's paramount that we would demonstrate and have the technology solved for design engineering, retrofitting to existing energy consuming devices, whether it's being run in an internal combustion engine or a diesel engine or hook it to an industrial process. So all of these design interfacing technology is now being solved. We are in the latter stages of what we call the pre-engineering system, which will now allow us to miniaturize the technology once we are completed on the design applications and take it into mass production. I'll give you a classical example of this. We've also developed from this technology which we call the water fuel cell injector. And basically this injector now is a miniaturized water fuel cell or miniaturized resonant cavity. And this technology now allows us to simply replace, we can bypass this part of the system's approach and now simply replace the spark plug with the water fuel cell injector. And as a result now we can run the water up to the injector, which is now being processed and being exposed to a very high pulse voltage frequency. And as a result, as the water fuel is being going into the system, then the explosion takes place inside the cylinder. Therefore, it makes this an extremely fail-safe, operable system. The cord that you see here is strictly hooks up to a very high intensity voltage pulse, and we restrict the amps to cause the electrical polarization process, which in turn the voltage amplitude now takes it and goes in the ionization state to perform the hydrogen fracturing technology. And then in turn the high pulse voltage frequency now allows the ignition of the gases. So therefore we do this electronically. And so this technology has taken us down to the water fuel cell water fuel injector as you see here today, which gives us a very economical way of simply converting and running a conventional car on natural water. So basically what we do is we feed ordinary natural water in here, non-processed natural water. We now feed the ambient air gases being ionized. It's being mixed with the water. And then we mix the non-combustible gases going in the system that regulates the control and so allows us now to release the thermal explosive energy from hydrogen and do it on a controlled means. Further development on on the technology, centered around also the development of what we call the laser accelerator control. And this had to be developed in order to translate from a mechanical displacement to an electronic displacement in order to allow the hydrogen computer system to produce the gas on demand based on acceleration control. So what you're really seeing with the water fuel cell as it is today is that we have a full system engineering approach allowing us now to use water as a main fuel source to be able to run a conventional engine and run it on water and do it and equal or supersede the performance of a car running on gasoline and diesel fuel. Many people do not realize that when you run a car or truck on either gasoline or diesel fuel, you're actually running it on hydrogen. And all we're doing is using the hydrogen from water. And under the National Bureau of Standards figures shows that when you use water, the energy release is roughly 2.5 times more powerful than that of gasoline. So water is a very powerful fuel. And all you needed to do was solve the answers of, number one, producing the hydrogen economically, controlling it on demand, being able to adjust the burn rate of hydrogen and gas to co-equal the fossil fuels, and the third one was to be able to transport it without spark ignition. And we've solved all of these problems on the design engineering, and of course the water fuel injector, as I've shown you, now gives us the abilities to transport the water directly to the fuel injector, which is now going into the voltage zones, which now is performing the electrical polarization process that goes and triggers the hydrogen fracturing technology, but it's doing it inside the engine. So we all know that natural water is very stable, and therefore it becomes a very fail-safe operable system, as we pointed out earlier. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, yeah. So in a system engineering approach, in mass production, it looks like we can translate and reduce the systems approach down to a unit that costs roughly $1,500 per vehicle. For trucks, it will be slightly larger than that, below $5,000. It looks like we'll be able to reach the economics to it and use an ordinary natural water. You add nothing to the water. You don't process the water in any way. Now here's another feature to the system that everybody asks me about, is what happens to the water in the wintertime? Does it freeze up? Well, part of our technology was in the areas of development what we call a steam resonator. Now, since the unlike atoms take on opposite electrical charges, we simply use another part of our technology to restrict the analog voltage to take over, and therefore we agitate the water molecules, which in turn generates kinetic energy, which in turn heats the water. Now, this is phenomenal in the fact we consume very little electrical energy in order to heat the water. So there are very far-ranging advantages and features to the technology, ranging even in the areas that we now have a way of using voltage and by switching off amp flow and dealing with the environmental control areas. We're developing the technology in the areas of desalination of salt water. Whenever you have a free and abundant energy source like water, it's only limited to the imagination to put it to work. This technology is very applicable to desalination of the salt water, handling of toxic waste chemicals by high pulse voltage frequency and restrict the amps. We now can separate the molecular structure of toxic chemicals and render them useless and safe. It also takes us to the technology of combining unlike atoms that heretofore was not possible under the natural state of covalent link-up. This led us to the development of the EPG electrical generator technology, where we're able to manufacture a magnetized gas that exists at room temperature and enhance the electromagnetic field without increasing mass. So our technology since the time of the era of embargo has been very far-reaching to give us a comprehensive energy source that we literally can use anywhere into the economies and move in a bilateral movement throughout the economies of the world to bring an energy source in. And as I pointed out earlier, the pending energy crisis will confront us very quickly. We literally have the ability now of systems engineering it to mass production very, very quickly, and hopefully be able to stem off this imminent energy crisis that is now occurring. A lot of people are not aware of that Kuwait produces or manufactures the majority of aviation fuel for the world, and it's anticipated, as pointed out earlier, that it's possible as much as 20% drop in aviation fuel may occur within 6 to 8 months. If that happens, then the dominoes effect will occur, and will start to trigger an energy shortage throughout the world. The same conditions that happen in the United States is also occurring in the Arab fields, where the natural pressure in the existing oil fields are dropping. The only difference between the U.S. and the Arab fields is their pressure is dropping 3 times faster than occurred in the United States. You just can't keep pulling the oil out of the ground and expect it's going to be there forever. The hourglass effect is occurring at a more faster rate now on nuclear power plants. China's opened the doors to Western technology. 25% of the population of the world wants the same goods and services that you and I have been enjoying, and that the industrial base cannot be maintained or expand without the supply and utilization of energy, of which we have very little fossil fuel left. So it's imperative that we develop the technology that we can move very quickly, and of course water was the answer to it, because water is a very free and abundant energy source. And so this technology has led us to the abilities of harnessing and using the water in this particular way, which we call the water fuel cell technology.
Could you give an indication of the amount of energy stored in a gallon of water compared to a barrel of oil, for instance?
Yes. As I pointed out earlier, when you separate the hydrogen and oxygen gases and go into the gas ignition process, its energy release is roughly 2.5 times that of gasoline. Now note, the reference is not 2.5 times that of fingernail polish, it's 2.5 times that of gasoline. But in the hydrogen fracturing technology, we have developed a technology, as the Lord has shown me, that by igniting the hydrogen and oxygen gases and setting up a condition by which the water molecule is prevented to form, then we now can tap into a very higher energy yield. And as a result of this, the hydrogen fracturing technology shows that we can release energy up to beyond 2.5 million barrels of oil per gallon of water and do it safely. And as I had shown you earlier, we are now preparing this technology to be retrofitted directly to a jet commander, which we plan not only to fly around the world non-stop around the equator, but turn 90 degrees and go from the North and South Pole. So it's a tremendous amount of energy source. And what we've done is found a triggering process to allow us to release this tremendous amount of energy and do it safely. So it gives us the ability to not only sustain and maintain the economies of the world, but also give us the abilities to handle the environmental pollution problems at the same time. We can't keep putting CO2 in the air and expect that the energy level is going to be there even for our plants. And we all talk about the greenhouse effect, but very few people come up with a viable answer to it. And the water fuel cell technology gives us the ability to get us.
Yes. Stanley, can you explain your driving force behind spending all this money and energy developing something like this? This cost you about 10 years of your life. Can you explain why you're doing all this and what really drives you to keep...
Well, I did an analysis during the Arab embargo as to what actually occurred. I didn't pay any attention to the political leaders as to why we had an energy problem. And I realized that without a new free and abundant energy source to come into the world economy very quickly, then the world economy could collapse. So as a scientist, I have a very diversified background from research development, product development, engineering, and corporate entrepreneuring. And when I realized the problem that was confronting us, I went into my office laboratory. And as a scientist, I had always believed that there was an existence of God. It was mathematically impossible that we had derived ourselves from swamp gas. If you got to have a lot of faith, you have to have a lot of faith to believe in evolution. And so I went into my office laboratory and I said, God, I love my country. It's the greatest country in the world. If you'll help me put a power supply in the country, I'll do anything that you want me to do. And subsequently, I was like Paul on the road to Damascus. I didn't know the Lord, but once he revealed himself to me, subsequently I was filled with the Holy Spirit, and I've been exercising the power and authority of the Word of God, bringing this technology in. And many people ask me about, do I fear my life? I have learned the power of angels, and I have been protected in trying to bring this technology in. The ultimate objective is not only to stabilize the economies of the world, but if we realize any funds from the technology, it will go into world evangelization. You see, as a scientist, once truth is shown to me, truth is truth. And, of course, I got what I wanted, a ticket to go into heaven. I got filled with the Holy Spirit. And so, as a scientist, truth is truth. And I have a responsibility just as I have a responsibility to the water fuel cell technology to try to bring it out into the world, I also have the responsibilities to relate the truth of the Word of God, not only to the guy, to the next door neighbor or the guy down the block, but also relate that truth of that knowledge to every person in the world if I possibly can do it. So the ultimate objective of the water fuel cell technology really is to help set the financial base of capable of evangelizing the world. Now there's a difference between spiritual knowledge and worldly knowledge. And you can't go to the world system and ask them to help evangelize the world and spread the gospel. But you can go to a world system and give them a cheap power supply that's so economically, that will save them economically, and then those funds will go into the world evangelization. So the water fuel cell technology, really, the ultimate objective is to accomplish the task of evangelizing the world by giving the financial abilities to do so. And that's my ultimate and prime objective. The water fuel cell will give us the abilities to do this.
Can you explain, you mentioned one Bible text,
Well, if you notice on my logo, you'll see Job 38, verse 22 and 23. And this is where the Lord is talking to Job, and he asks Job this question. He says, have you considered the treasures of snow, or have you considered the treasures of hell, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against battle and war? Now, the interpretation of the scriptures are as follows. Is not snow the most beautiful part about water? That no one snowflake looks exactly the same as that of another? The treasures of snow is the characteristic and knowledge of water. The Lord knew that, in fact, that we would have and reach a very critical point in our history, that since we went on dependency of fossil fuels, the flow of fossil fuels may be disrupted. And as a result, the Lord specified that this knowledge of water would come out of time of great trouble. But he also specified that the knowledge would come out prior to two events.
Okay, so now that we've heard how the thing functions, you explained your background, why you're working on this thing. What do you think of possible applications, and where do you think this device can be applied, in what scale, and what's the amount of energy we can get out of it? Like you talked before about converting cars, commercial airplanes. Is there any other application you think of?
Oh yes, not only is this technology applicable for all modes of transportation, but it also has application in industrial processes. During the air embargo, I was called in a meeting in Columbus, Ohio with the industrial leaders, and Columbia Gas System informed us that our gas was being cut off 100%. What actually were telling us that we were going out of business. And I saw some of the most richest and most powerful industrial leaders of the state popping pills, and I thought they were going to have heart attacks. Because basically, without energy, you can't make a product. If you can't make a product, you can't make profit. If you can't make profits, you cannot pay your bills. So, as a result, the bigger you are, the harder you fall, the faster that you would go into economic bankruptcy. So, it was imperative that this technology not only be developed for the transportation areas, but also to apply to industrial applications, to be able to give energy. The technology and the hydrogen fracturing technology that gave us the abilities to go in and to protect the military integrity of the Western world. So this technology is applicable not only in those areas, but for example, during the Arab embargo, our Navy task force did not have the fuel. And so as we have the abilities now to go on the maritime applications, literally run the ships off of water as a main fuel source, and at the same time using the application is cleaning up our environment and preventing from the CO2 and the contaminants that go in the air. So we can move this technology bilateral in every aspect of the economy and do it very, very quickly. And so that leads us now into the fact that we have been developing this technology for mass production. And so once we finalize debugging of the pre-engineering unit, then we're going to translate it into a very cost-effective system by taking the technology into microchip technology, and plastic mold injection technology allows us now to move this type of technology very quickly. Matter of fact, one master mold set can produce over 11,000 units every 24 hours. That gives us abilities now to move in a bilateral movement, but to get the energy source throughout the entire world quickly, if the oil is shut off to us, either by war or by some other methods. A lot of people do not realize Saddam has the viral germ through genetic restructuring, that if he uses it, it lives off the bacteria of air and water and even of oil, and if he uses this, it's possibly that the oil could be contaminated very quickly. And if that is so, then every country in the world would be faced of shutting off the flow of oil to each of their countries. Now, without the supply of fossil fuels, within 180 to 240 days thereafter, about 1.5 billion people would be facing starvation very, very quickly because we need that flow of energy in order to maintain the industrial basis of the world. So we've designed the technology to be very flexible to use every segment of the economy and do it very quickly. So we're all in the same boat. And what we're doing is illustrating that, yes, the technology is viable. Here we do have a viable technology that we now can use water as a fuel source because water is a very free and abundant fuel source. But it's going to take you and I and the guy down the street and the people in each country to bring this technology into the marketplace to stabilize their countries. And so as a result, we are developed it under the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid, to comply with the law of economics that the guy who comes up with the cheapest way is going to win out. So by decentralizing the mass production of the system and the fabrication of the system and decentralize the installation of the system, then we should be able to move in a bilateral movement throughout all the countries of the world to get this type of technology into their countries to stabilize their economic base. If the oil is cut off by these means, or it simply is being cut off by a lack of supply of oil that's now showing. It's the same natural pressure that dropped in the airfields, as I pointed out a little earlier, is also occurring in the North Sea. The North Sea pressure has dropped by 1/3. So we all need the energy, and so therefore I feel that it's going to take the people of the world to come together and the leaders of each country to come together in one accord in order to allow this type of technology to go on to stabilize their economic basis in each respective country.
Do you have any time scale for mass production set up yet? And second, do you have any organization, or you're planning an organization, international? Or?
Yes, we are. I'm negotiating with many leaders of different countries of the world. But the ultimate objective is to mobilize the masses of the people in order to bring it in. This is the only way that can come in. And so as we finalize our debugging of the system and take it into mass production areas, we can do this by simply turning the technology over to many, many fabricators and people who have certain skills in the machining areas or mass production areas that will allow this type of technology to be produced very quickly.
Thanks very much for this interview.
Oh, my pleasure.
We appreciate it very much. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'll see your red light.
Out of focus is on now. Okay, go ahead. Okay, Stanley, can you give us some idea about the size of a conversion kit for a car, for instance? We see all this electronics sitting there, but I guess this is not going to be part of a future upgrade kit for a car, is it?
No, basically what this was a pre-engineering unit in order to satisfy the U.S. Code of Operability on Section 35, Section 101. And it was developed as pre-engineering to show the operability of all the different operational parameters of water fuel cell. But in actuality, the entire technology you see here is really reduced down to the water fuel cell injectors you see right here.
This is the only thing that's needed for upgrading a car, or is there anything else involved?
No, the water fuel cell injector, which replaces the conventional spark plug in an internal combustion engine, this is hooked up to a water tank. Basically, if you have a plastic fuel tank in your car, you simply drain out the gasoline, flush it out, fill it up with fresh water. Then the water fuel cell injector now allows the water to be transferred. The system approach allows the water to go in to the injector, which is now being processed to release the thermal explosive energy from hydrogen. The second part that's hooked up to it is what we've referred to here again as the gas processor that's ionizing the gas to allow it to come in. So basically in retrofit, all we're doing is simply tapping off the exhaust gases from the conventional engine. We're now using the gas processor to utilize the ambient air to ionize the gases, which is now mixing with the water, which now converts it to water fuel. We allow the water fuel to go into the injector that's now plugged into our replaces your spark plug, and allows the engine now to run off the thermal explosive energy from hydrogen. So basically, all we're doing is taking the gasoline out of the tank, fill it up with water. We now replace the spark plug with the water fuel cell injector, and we now hook a small little miniaturized computer which controls and meter mixes the gases going in the engine to allow the engine to accelerate and deaccelerate. So the installation is a very small, lightweight, compact electronic control system.
Okay, now the distributor. Is that going to be the same? Can I use the same distributor, or do you have a modified version, or is there anything additional to it? Can you
Yes,
explain
we
about
do.
that?
We do modify the distributor as it's shown over here. We simply take off the conventional gas rotor cap out of a conventional engine, and we put the laser distributor in between the distributor assembly and the cap, and this now sends the signals to the computer system, which will really be a composite of several IC or integrated circuit chips that miniaturizes the hydrogen computer system.
Okay. This whole hydrogen stuff, isn't it extremely explosive in the car? Is there any danger involved? What's the safety aspect of it all?
No, we have actually solved the problem. There's no storage of hydrogen whatsoever. The water goes into the injector, which now allows it to go into a high pulse voltage zone, which performs the electrical polarization process. So the water is only converted into thermal explosive energy as it enters the injector. So the thermal explosive energy is now occurring inside the engine. So the electronic system is designed to regulate and control the explosion of the energy, which now co-equals that of gasoline. So it's a tremendously fail-safe, operable system.
Okay, so it's safe, it's a small system.
Yes.
What about maintenance of the car engine itself? Do I need more maintenance? Is there a difference? Is there anything, do I have to modify anything on the maintenance schedule?
No, just keep the same maintenance as you have it. Since you're releasing thermal explosive energy into the engine and you're co-equaling the burn rate of gasoline, then there's very little maintenance. If there is any maintenance at all, we developed the technology years ago that we could really impregnate the cylinder walls of the engine with Teflon, and we can even impregnate treat the bearings and literally run an engine off of the Teflon and eliminate the oil. If that occurs, then you can use a product something like Slick 50 in the engine if you would need it. But the wear factor, since it's a very clean burning fuel, hydrogen is a very clean burning fuel, then the engine oil is not contaminated under the old method of running on gasoline or diesel fuel. So it's an extremely clean burning fuel.
Are we on?
Yeah, the red
Low temper. Good, Stanley. What about the valves in the engine? The pistons, don't the pistons burn out because there's no lubrication of the lead or any other additives to the usual gas?
No, the valves, have been designed very recently to operate off of non-leaded gasoline, and since we use the exhaust gases to cycle back in to modulate the burn rate of hydrogen gas, as we now control the burn rate to co-equal gasoline, then the engine temperature and operations are duplicating the same thing on gasoline or diesel fuel. So you don't change the engine in any way. And this allows us now to retrofit the water fuel cell technology to any existing engine. And it's very important because it now gives us ability that we can stabilize transportation, as we talked about before, if the energy is cut off.
Okay, so now the accelerator. Can I still keep the same mechanical accelerator, or do you have a new device for that as well?
Yes, we developed over here as we come along. We've developed the what we call a laser accelerator, as you see right here, that simply is attached to the accelerator pedal, and it as you press the pedal down, the gas pedal down, it displaces the mechanical displacement into electrical impulses, which now is fed into the micro-miniaturized computer electronics. So this gives us the abilities now to control the acceleration. This type of technology has given us the abilities to equal or supersede the performance of acceleration and deacceleration on conventional cars that's running on gasoline or diesel fuel. So the hydrogen, being 2.5 times more powerful than gasoline, gives us a tremendous amount of performance over the prior state of the art. It runs very smoothly, and it has a very unusual sensation. Generally, when you're running a car on gasoline, you have this kind of a pause. But when you're running on hydrogen, the way we're doing it, it's a constant acceleration. So it's a extremely very fast responding fuel source that's coming from water.
So you're claiming that performance is equal or better as a normal gasoline car?
Oh yes, definitely. It'll even start up quicker. In the wintertime, you're dealing with a liquid gasoline or liquid diesel fuel, and you have problems in starting. In cold weather, you don't freeze gas atoms, and so by converting the water into instant energy, gives us the ability to start the engine very, very quickly.
When you start an engine in the morning, for instance, how long does it take before you can drive away?
Oh, it's an instantaneous startup. Immediately when the pulse voltage frequency hits the water, it converts it to the gas, which now produces the thermal explosive energy. So it's an instant type of start.
Okay.
The electronic circuit interfacing gives us the abilities to control and meter the amount of water that's going in on the start condition as opposed to on a run condition. So the computer automatically adjusts between the start condition and the run condition. So electronically, we have the abilities to adjust for these parameters. And the same as a conventional car, we also have the abilities to adjust for different ambient air conditions going from sea level up into the mountain ranges. So automatically, the electronic circuitry design gives us the abilities to adjust these parameters to give us a very smooth operational performance.
But what about air pressure? I mean, when you go up high in the mountains, you don't use ambient air, so it has no influence on the performance of the car.
No, if you come over here, here we have a device is a metal bellows, which now allows to control the amount of ambient air going into the engine of the car. And this automatically allows us to regulate the ambient air pressures going from sea level up into the mountain areas. So electronically, these solenoids you see here have sensors that automatically senses the amount of ambient air pressures, and they're automatically electronically adjusted to compensate it for difference of air pressure. So this allows us now to give us tremendous good performance going from sea level right on up into the high mountain regions.